morning. I'm just wondering who's up for making a hedgehog. Right, so I've got some spiky fabric from Etsy and I've got 15mm long spikes because you can get it in different lengths. As I'm doing a big hedgehog, I thought I'd go for the longer spikes. I have another piece the same size as this, which I've cut in half to make two small hedgehogs. This piece itself is 180mm across and 250mm in length. And it will need to be trimmed, but I'm not going to do that until I've actually made the body of the hedgehog so that I can put it on and fit it. This will have to be sewn onto the actual body of the hedgehog. And I'm going to be using what's left over from my emu for his actual fluff on his body, because it's going to be the right colour. I don't want it stripy obviously, so I will show you how I use dog brushes to blend the wool in together and make it into a more interesting paler browny grey sort of colour, which I think will be the right colour for his actual body. Okay, so I'm gonna make the armature. I'm actually cheating because I made the armature for the hedgehog previously just to get the measurements and make sure that I knew what I was doing, because I've not made an armature for a hedgehog before. And what I've got here cut out ready is actually smaller than the life-size hedgehog, but it's exactly the same armature. So I'm going to put this one together for you to see how it works, but I'll give you the measurements for the big armature because obviously I've given you the measurements for the big piece of fabric, and then I'll use this smaller armature for one of the smaller hedgehogs that I'm going to make later on. So the measurements you will need, I'm using 22 gauge wire again, and I have got 3 pieces of wire which are going to be 180mm long, and that is for the back legs. Now they do have 4 toes, but you'll need a long piece which I've got here, which I've folded in half. That long piece will be 280mm, and that actually goes down through the body and then joins onto the back leg, so that would then give you your 4 toes. You'll also need then for the neck and for the front paws 4 pieces of wire that are 250mm long. Okay, so that's the pieces of wire that you're going to need to cut. 4 at 250mm, 3 at 180mm, and 1 long piece at 280mm, which will be folded in half. Okay, so what I'm going to do to start off with is twist these legs together. So grip the middle bit with my pliers and then remember how I said about if you can splay it out without them falling out of the pliers, that would be great. We'll just give them a little twist to start off with. Remember the spiky ends. Okay, so if I splay these out now, I can turn them and that will give me my legs. Okay, bend that in the middle, squeeze it together, and that gives me my front legs and my neck, the neck. Okay, so then I'm going to take my body piece and hook it very carefully over the top of the neck, and then twist it. So if I pull the arms out again, twist it twice around the arms, 1, 2, There we go, make a little shoulder and then twist the body 2 pieces together until I'm left with however long I need for my feet. Okay, so when you get to the end, when you get to the last bit of the legs, I'm going to wrap the body piece around twice, and then the legs will just splay them out and give them a twist together. And don't forget, it doesn't matter if you've got some toes longer than others, because you will be trimming them up anyway. And hedgehog toes, while we're on that subject, aren't like mice toes. They haven't got long ones in the middle and then short ones at the end. They have long ones at the front. So I'm going to put this one at the front and this one at the front, these very long ones. Okay, and then they get shorter as they go, so I'm just going to trim that long one up because that is really ridiculously long. Okay, so that's how a hedgehog's feet are. Okay, so now we have an armature for a hedgehog. So here is my big armature for my big hedgehog. And now I'm going to start wrapping. I've got some dark brown wool, and I'm going to start wrapping him, or wrapping his legs anyway, so that his little leggies can then be glued and dried and ready for the rest of his body to be wrapped. Okay, so I've got my shape for my hedgehog. I'm quite happy with his face and the rest of the shape of him, his little feet, so I'm quite happy with that. I've laid the fabric over him. It needs to come back. He's got to have his ears about here, and so his spikes are going to come just a little bit forward of his ears and then go back behind his ears. So I have cut already the piece that goes around his ears and down to his back. So if I place this about here, allow for his ears, and then that will scoop down the side of his body and come round to his bum, which is going to be more covered. It's quite tricky getting it right. He's got to have a little bit of a forehead, and make sure obviously that you've got the spines going in the right direction. But I think I'm going to take a wee bit more around where I'm going to place his ears, like that. So if I do that on that side, fold the fabric over and then just cut that little bit of ear out. And then if I place that back over his head, that should tuck nicely behind where his ears are going to be situated back here, so that should work well and merge in with his ears quite nicely, coming down his side. And then his bum, you're going to end up with a crease, so we're going to have to, we'll stitch that in. So I think we'll cut that pleat out. And then I can curve that round for his bum. So every time I do something on one side, I'm going to repeat it on the other, just because I really want him to be even. It really is, this is the hardest part for me, getting the fur and the spikes right. This fabric's not cheap, so when you buy this fabric you don't want to cock up. And I'm keeping all the cut-offs as well, because they're great for making little short, little tiny hedgehogs, little miniature ones. So we've got our pleats in, might have to adjust those slightly, and then what I want to do is cut round, follow the line round to the base of his bum, which is going to be in the middle there. So cut round his leg to tie up with his pleats. I think I'm going to make that pleat just a little bit deeper. hedgehog spikes everywhere. Alright, so this is our pattern. It's very difficult. It would be easy for me if I made a kit for a hedgehog for you. It would be okay because I would give you the correct amount of wool, etc, etc. But when I'm trying to explain to you on here how to do it, to make an actual template for the fur isn't going to work while you're following this, so you really are going to have to feel your way with it. The reason being, you might have a slightly plumper one, you might have a skinnier one, in which case my template is not going to fit your hedgehog. At some point I am going to be putting kits together to sell in the Etsy shop, but I've never done them before, so that's a whole work in progress. I have been asked for PDF files on how to make these things, so that's another thing that I'm going to have to look into doing. Like I said before, I'm learning with you guys. I'm doing all of this. I've made hedgehogs before, but never quite as realistic as I'm trying to achieve with this one. So I will be looking into making my PDF files and patterns so that I can start selling the actual kits in the shop as well. This is kind of my way of working it out for myself so that I can go back and do what I need to do to create these kits. But I'm taking you along on the journey because when you do, or when I do get the kits together, and if you do buy a kit or anybody buys a kit, they can follow the YouTube tutorials to help explain how to do it. This is my thinking. You know, you've got the pattern, you've got the PDF, you've got the kit, and then you've got the YouTube channel as well to follow. So while I'm doing these YouTube channels, it's kind of my way of getting my head straight on how I'm doing it so that I can work kits out and things for people for selling in the shop. So onwards and upwards, it's all growing, it's all progressing. Anyway, so back to my hedgehog. Here he is. That's what he's going to look like from a side profile. Obviously when I stitch the spikes on, it'll pull it in tight and it'll make it look much more natural. I've bought these needles, millwood needles. For anybody that lives down in Devon, I got mine from Trago's, quite cheap. But the idea of them is, because they're such a long needle, to help secure the fabric, the spike fabric, the needle will go right the way through from one side to the other, so that stitches, not only just stitches it to the edge of the hedgehog itself. So if I was stitching into this, it's not going to be majorly secure because it can pull, but if I can stitch right the way through to the other side, then that is really going to secure the body completely and also the spiky fabric. But obviously I'll demonstrate that a bit more when I'm ready to stitch him on. But for now, I'm quite happy with the way that his spikes have turned out. And my next job will be to stitch that in place, because then I can build the rest of the hedgehog around him. He's going to have fur. He's, like I said previously, I'm going to use the fur that I bought for the emu. It's the same colours, it's absolutely perfect. So I'm going to use that to merge into the actual spikes themselves, so that you haven't just got the hedgehog and then the spikes. Okay, so stitching, that's my next job. Okay, I'm using my longest needle because that will comfortably go through the whole of the hedgehog. I've got some nice strong black thread, Gutterman, only because I think they are a really good thread, although they're not cheap. But this is a really strong thread. This is not going to come apart. Okay, so I'm going to use it double. I'm going to start off coming from underneath, so I'm hiding my knot. And I am just literally straight across and through the other side. And that has now secured the headpiece of my hedgehog. Make sure it's nice and straight. Yep. Alright, so it's through my fabric, but I'm going to go into the hedgehog, not back into the fabric, but into the hedgehog. And then back out the other side. Through the actual fabric. Obviously you've got an armature inside there, so you need to be careful when you're putting the needle through that you don't just ram it into the armature and then break the needle. Through the hedgehog. The fabric. Okay, the only problem is with this is you run out of thread quite quickly. And I'm going to stitch him like this all the way round. I'm not going to worry about stitching the pleats. I'll do that afterwards with an over sew. But I'm going to stitch it all the way around so I get all of his spikes done and in place. Okay, I can get one more stitch out of that. I would tie this off is I would cut my thread near to my needle, so I want a nice long length, cut my thread off by my needle and then start the process again with another lot of thread. Thread my needle. Just put a little knot in there just to secure it. And then what I would do is I would tie my two threads together. And that would be my threads tied off, because it's not easy to tie it off with a big long needle like that any other way. So there we go, so I'm ready to start again. Okay, now I've got next to the section now where I have my first pleat, so what I'm going to do is put the needle back through to the other side. Okay, and then on this occasion I am going to introduce the other piece of fabric and stitch across the bottom of that. So I've put my stitch, instead of going back through the actual hedgehog, I'm going actually back through the fabric on this occasion. And I'll take it back over to the other side. Okay, so I've sewn his spikes on, and I'm going to just over sew, just very gently over sew these pleats so that there's no gap there. And then I'm going to put a stitch either side at the top of the pleats just to pull that bit in, that little point that we've got there, just to pull it in. That's all I need to do. And then I'm going to stick his eyes in position. So I've shaped his nose, and now I just need to stick his little eyes in position. I've shaped up his face just a little bit, and if you can see from a side profile there, I'm just going to give him a little bit of a bottom lip, bottom jaw. So a little piece of felt. Just going to shape that round. And I'm going to fit that on underneath his jaw. Okay, so I'm blending some of my brown and white fabric together, just a little bit to go around the tips of his nose, around his nose area. So I'm using my dog brushes for this, and I've put a bundle on there, and I'm just going to brush it through. And that's how I blend wool. So you can see it's blending in nicely, but it's still got patches of brown and patches of cream in it, which is a little bit more realistic than just solid colours. So I'm going to use that to go around his nose and to go around his eyes and around his facial area. Okay, I'm going to start his face now, and I'm going to use some of the blended wool that I made to work into his actual spikes, and then I'm going to use this colour here to blend into that before I go into the cream on his face. So it's quite technical because it's lots of colours and lots of mixing and matching. But to start off with, I'm going to put this around the edge here, and I'm going to work it right up to the edge of the fabric and push it in underneath the fabric. The wool that I'm knotting together, the fibres I'm knotting together, I'm doing that in underneath the fabric. And that will be trimmed. That will be trimmed to go into his spiky fabric. Put it around this side. There we go. So, having done that, I actually think the next best thing is to get his ears in place, and then I can work around his ears. I am going to use some of this wool. I'm going to blend some of this wool like this so I can make his ear. So I'm going to do that nice and round. Get all that in. And then using my multi-stabber, for want of a better name, I'm going to give it a little bit of colour just to make it look a bit real. I'm just going to put this around inside of the edge of the ear. Alright, so ears done. Now to get them in place. Okay, we like that one. Right, I'm going to do a bit more of this dark one, and I'm going to bring it a bit further down his nose. Up to his ears. And then I'm going to go into the other colour. Take that in. And then for his nose piece, I'm going to use the bits that I have blended. Right, so that's his face so far. He's got to have his black nose, and I'm going to put some more of this colour just around under here. Right, so face done as much as I can for a minute. I haven't done his nose, but I will do that in a minute when I go and find the black. But for now, I'm going to go round his body, just round the edges with this dark one that I've blended, and I will use what's left of my sandy colour and this creamy colour then to go into his belly.